Coffee all ready to go. So
Hey.
oh, there. Okay. So you can hear me?
Yep.
All right. Excellent.
The default speaker has gone to this one.
Ah, all right. Yeah, I've got
Actually, the other way around.
there you go. All right. So
Partly because I'm totally deaf in one ear, I make everything mono. So you get all these stereo headsets. You've got one side only.
yeah, yeah. I tend to use when I walk
Yeah.
and listen to
Well,
things, I tend to use
but
just
you,
one of these. But it's not, I mean, because
yeah.
because this isn't Apple, it's not quite as good at figuring it out.
Well, that's the one I've just put on charge.
Yeah.
The problem is, of course, the controls. You need both of them.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm going. Why have I got two earpieces?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
just change channel up, down, off,
Right.
or
Right.
whichever way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and sometimes it requires both of them to be in order for the Bluetooth to kind of connect and do its thing. And then I can take one out and kind of keep going. So, yeah. Oh, here comes Thomas. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Doing all right.
Good. Good. Oh, here comes Chris. All right. So it is 10 o'clock my time. So I guess it's time to go. Maybe first, since we're probably the crew that's going to be here today, we should talk about what's next. I have two suggestions. I was kind of looking at the page in Obsidian today, and the two things that kind of jumped out at me that look really interesting are either the new Pinker book, which just came out, which is kind of about common sense, common knowledge. And then the other one that jumped out at me was Tim's suggestion, The Dawn's Early Light, which seems to be a collection of articles that kind of all group around a bunch of themes. Seems like that one we could do probably in 5 weeks or so. And that's there are five, I think there were five, maybe there were six sections that had, 3, 4, 5 articles each in them. Tim, do
Okay.
you want to advocate for your selection? Oh, we might have lost Tim. Tim might have lost sound again.
Was it Tim's selection or
I
I
thought
see
it.
Pat's name. It's
Oh,
Pat's
maybe.
name I see on it.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that'd be a way of dragging Pat back into the thing. Let me go back to the Obsidian Vault.
It
No, it's turned off.
and it looks like it'll have,
And I
a
was looking at the other half of the
2025
screen.
flavor,
Yeah,
which could be interesting to see.
right. Well, yeah, taking back. Yeah, the subtitle is "Taking Back Washington to Save America," and but it does sound. I mean, it's a heritage Foundation thing. So forward by
Hmm.
J.D. Vance, and then the book is by the Heritage Foundation president Kevin Roberts. So that will definitely give us a perspective, which will be a perspective that we're not necessarily always looking at. The other one might be that, oh, maybe Tim's one. Yeah, that one was Pat's. Tim's one was the human economy, which it was in need of some commas, but other than that, did have that was the one that had the parts in it. I'm sorry, I misspoke. That had the parts with the different essays or articles, small articles. So that might be Tim, do you want to
Any
say
more
something about
need
that
of
one? Oh, here comes Mark. Hey,
any
Mark.
more need
Hey.
of Mark?
Mark,
Anyway,
we
Mark,
just started
I've
talking
just dropped
about what to do next.
just dropped into the chat. Oddly
Yeah.
enough,
I
the
just,
thing
just
that I was thinking about for you
I just threw
while
that in
reading
the,
this week.
I just threw
And
something
I'm
in too,
now trying to look further up my notes to get the other one.
but
Um,
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I see Tim's. I don't see anything in the chat from you, Mark.
okay, let me go back and check
You may
quick.
have not been
I just
quite enough
did it. That's why I
in.
was late. I wanted to get it in there.
Okay.
but no,
It usually doesn't
None of
actually,
these
it
are.
usually doesn't capture it until you're on screen in my experience in Zoom.
Was it the Karen Ho, the Empire AI Dreams?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that one I
Oh, you
have
got it?
started
Probably
on
read it
that one.
too.
Okay, so you
I
got it,
have.
but I didn't get it. That's interesting.
I'm looking in the book suggestions in
Oh,
Obsidian.
I'm sorry, you were putting it in there. I
I
gotcha.
didn't, yeah, I'm sorry. I just swear I stuck it. I
Uh,
didn't know where you guys are at. I listened completely to the last one, and I don't remember anything about book discuss future, but
no, right. No, that's why I thought I would start. I would bring it up today as kind of our first sort of.
I mean, it's just an interesting book if you're interested in
Yeah,
AI. And it has similar, I don't know, I think a similar flavor to Lanier, more focused on the AI folks, and I don't know, their process and their I don't know, short-sightedness maybe.
Mm,
yeah,
mhm.
yeah. Focuses largely on OpenAI and
Is it
just sort
open? It
of
does look like it's kind of open AI focused. Yeah.
yeah. It started with Karen Ho's. She embedded with them when she was with MIT Technology Review
Mm.
and did an article, and that got her banned from OpenAI.
Ah.
Yeah.
Um, and all of the employees loved it, and Altman hated it. But it is, have seen her
I heard an
talk a
interview
few
with her that I
times.
was
Yeah,
impressed by, and that's why
Mm.
I
yeah,
bought it.
yeah.
I
I went to see her go speak, talk about the book at a local independent bookstore here in DC
Mhm.
as well, and it just have started in on it a couple times, and I'm just like, I need to set time for this.
yeah,
And everybody I know that has read it, no matter whether they're fans of generative AI or not, just rave about it.
Mm.
It's really well put together. She brings up all the sort of pain points, but then also just sort of where it works really well. And then some of the decisions and trade-offs they made with going with generative AI and putting money and compute power toward that and pulling it away from
outstanding. Yeah,
health and other things
yeah.
where it was doing incredible work.
You mean as a society or
As
OpenAI
an
itself?
industry.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean part of the message is let's see how far we can take the tool rather than let's start trying to solve specific problems and see
Yeah.
how far we can get. I mean, is that a fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess my question is I'm not against it, but my question would be if ChatGPT dries up and OpenAI, kind of dries up and blows away, is it relevant to the rest of the kind of AI
Yeah.
landscape, and is it
Yeah.
worth an investment of 500 pages?
I would
It's
think so because it has enough, it gives you a really good understanding of the trade-offs from an economic standpoint, from a business standpoint, what the value is within generative AI, how it actually functions and what it does. And then also just sort of gets into know, the understanding of OpenAI as an organization, but
Okay.
it deeply applies to like all the others out there and just sort of where things are and gives you a really good foothold because she was the AI person at MIT Technology Review.
Mhm.
Um, she knew all the players, still knows the lay of the land incredibly well, and has a deep background from a journalistic standpoint from broad AI perspective, not just generative AI.
Okay. Okay. So,
I mean, it's really a matter of how of the various I don't know directions this
Yeah,
organization, whatever you call this, takes. You,
you mean
you
us?
know, this is like continuing down the
Are we
tech
are
road,
we in are we an organization
specifically
now? I
focused
guess we've
on
been doing
AI.
this for like 4 years almost, so maybe we
Well, I
are.
know, but I mean, yeah, it's not about taking notes, all right?
yeah,
Right, right. No, that's
yeah,
true. But the other ones that I had kind of mentioned also are not about taking notes. So that's not any
yeah,
different, right? The ones that I was sort of nominating, as the ones that looked interesting were the pinker one, the brand new pinker one, when everyone knows that everyone knows. So common knowledge on the mysteries of money, power, and everyday life. Now, I'm not. I think that one is probably much more lightweight than
Hmm.
than this one.
I, I saw War was on the Woodward's book was on the list. I don't know. I have read that one.
I don't know
And
that I could. I don't know that I could stand to spend weeks
well, yeah, okay.
on Bob
And
Woodward.
my point, and I tried to add that to the discussion too, was well, how relevant is it now?
Yeah, right, right.
I mean, we're stuck with Trump,
Well,
so
Yeah, true, true. Well, it's kind
it's
of it's
historical, let's put it that way.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of funny because I just became aware of another historian making YouTube videos, and I just watched
hmm,
his post from yesterday, and it was sort of, and he's just written a book. His name is Tad Sturmer, and
hmm,
he works at like the University of Southern Denmark or something, and he's just written a book called Resistance. Or
Uh,
something
hmm,
close to that. That is not unfortunately going to be out till June 2026. But I suppose
hmm.
that's sooner than I think it is, but it's so it's available for pre-order. But he's he did one today about Pam Bondi's confrontation with the Senate and how this is and he talked a lot about nullification and then he went on this whole thing about the kind of about the ways that um, that the Reconstruction, that the radical Republicans during Reconstruction had sort of circumvented the executive power of Andrew Johnson and done a bunch of things and overturned vetoes and impeached Johnson and all those things that they did. And I wasn't really 100% sure which type of resistance he was really sort of advocating for. Because it's sort of like, well, you're wishing that something could be done, it seems, that would affect some type of a change. But if you're going to sort of validate these types of techniques, then what are you going to say when they use them against you? And I think that's I don't know. I think that's an interesting,
that's what
an interesting
the new
resistance moment. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that war might have, kind of come and gone.
lost its sizzle.
Yeah, but that human economy one that Tim suggested looked kind of interesting. Hopefully the in the actual book there are some commas.
No, the comment issue was they were trying to like not make it look AI written.
Yeah, I guess. They used a lot of ampersands, but I'm not sure that that's a legitimate solution. But yeah, that one. But I'd be down for Empire of AI. I mean that I.
Well, either that or we could put it in the next slot.
Mhm,
I've only read,
Yeah.
short part of it, and I got interested because I heard maybe like somebody else talking about that. I heard her online, and she
mhm.
very impressive. And
Yeah.
then I started the book, and yeah, it's just like as advertised.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess that was going to be that was my other question when you said that she did a thing, if she did a long form thing online, is there m much more in the book that would
Oh,
make that worthwhile as opposed to, listening to, a good, multi-hour.
I could,
Kind
well, let's, yeah, we can put it off. I can share. I listened to Leo Laporte's podcast stuff,
Hmm.
and one of the sessions was essentially a probably 20-30 minute interview with her.
of. Hmm.
That's what got me interested. And then, I
Okay.
mean, she was impressive there.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I've seen a few interviews with her and also seeing her in person, and it's
Oh,
what she talks about. It's like different in each one. She writes really well, and she's got a lot of depth in the domain.
Hmm.
And so
What
it's
I'm what I'm waiting
yep.
for is a cisgender white guy to write a cautionary tale about the pitfalls of technology because I'm just like I feel so awash and stuff by so there's this book by Karen here, there's Kathy O'Neill, Sophia
Donna Zuboff.
Noble, like all these women writing about Meredith Broussard, like I just this unending litany of women who like have taken over the space of technology is going to destroy us,
There's
which
also guys, there's an
it's so
awful lot of men
obvious,
writing about it too.
you
Yes.
know.
White guys.
Maybe, maybe.
No,
And
no
because you've got
thoughtful
like
takes anyway.
yeah, there's an like going and they lean on an awful lot of the stuff like is it Stephen Bossum? There's a whole bunch of stuff that is out there. Um and the Gen AI piece is really weird because it doesn't it it's essentially like interpretive dance because it's not necessarily dance or ballet. It just sort of like pretends to be, and it aims to be something that a human with their frailties and sort of tilting toward mediocrity could do. And that's sort of the best and sort of where AIML prior had been was being able to give a good understanding for what humans couldn't see and then work to give a foundation for moving forward. So
Mhm.
within sciences being able to find, early problem states far before humans can sense them or see them. And it's like these things, maybe an indication, that pandemic is coming, an airline engine is going to need repair 3 or 4 months earlier,
Mhm.
but it will give you advance notice. And that sort of stuff is really good. And that's sort of where Gen AI took the compute power that was aimed at doing that stuff and moved it to the interpretive dance side of, hey, this is entertaining. And we're not doing anything that necessarily helps humanity, but it is something that entertains them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
That might,
a lot
yeah.
of the, and so there's a whole lot of white guys who have been writing about this for a long time as well.
Well, it looks like there are four sections
You know?
in this book, this Empire of AI. What if we did it and then did it over the course of 4 weeks and
Mhm.
and brought in a not another reading, but maybe a YouTube video interview kind of thing,
Sure.
not of her particularly, but of, somebody like Shoshana Zuboff or one of these other people who
Yeah.
are, who are sort of ringing
Hmm.
bells of alarm about tech. And the theme of the 4 weeks could be sort of
Yeah.
tech problems or, tech
Yeah.
dystopia or whatever.
Yeah. There's a really good talk. I think it's out public now on YouTube with Tim O'Reilly talking with one of the two guys academics at Yale that talk about AI as normal technology
Mm,
and just sort of, and Tim O'Reilly is sort of like taking the hype messages that are out there and puts them in front of them. And it's like, hey, this is going to do all this stuff. And they're like, not exactly. This isn't,
mm.
agentic AI is not close. All this other stuff is just not close. But here are the things that it can do and how we need to think about it a little bit better.
Oh, that would be
And that's like an
interesting.
hour-long talk.
Yeah, because I mean, that type of thing would put some teeth to this, hand waving that Jaron has been doing
Yep.
about, well, it isn't really what you think it is and stuff, but
Hmm.
he's kind of vague about that aside from his, the translation thing that
Yeah.
he's always talking about.
Yeah.
Um,
I can dig that out.
okay. Okay. So shall we do that? Is everyone cool with that?
Sure.
Okay. So the
Chris?
Chris,
Eh,
eh,
it would be nice to have a palate cleanser between technology books, but I'll
Yeah.
be okay.
Yeah.
I got some strong coffee.
The human
um,
human economy looks interesting also.
Sure.
yeah.
Just looking at the high level on that.
Hmm.
How long?
I mean, we've got, three big options mentioned. I'm okay with all of them. So,
Okay. Part one, part two, part three, part four. There are 5 parts in human economy. Um, And I didn't actually look at the page counts, but those,
It's 320.
okay. Well, then these are short essays. Oh, and there's a communism one by Graeber. All right. Um,
Huh.
so that's going to be probably mostly fields. I'm just going to guess.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I could palate cleanse with this the human economy. I think it's, that's definitely coming from looks like a much lefter position. So we probably won't, either way, we probably won't manage to suck Pat back in right away. But yeah, I would go with that too. So
Let
who's for human economy first, and then Empire of AI.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the suggestion, Chris.
I,
Palette
you know,
cleanse.
the other thing to consider too is what do we want to be reading during the holidays after, because the next is whatever this next book is going to carry us up to about Thanksgiving-ish. And then, what do you want to be reading at Christmas time? I mean, what do you want to be reading when midwinter arrives and you're ready to do the Mari Lowed, festival, for those who celebrate?
Hmm. Walk with
So
you.
It's
I'll just wait for when the overnight temperature gets below 30. Right? Centigrade.
What
Centigrade.
and the darkness is the thing, the temperature for me.
What do you want to be chatting with your friends about as you're wassailing through the community?
Right, right. Going from station to station of the light, the Festival of Light. Yeah, that's I don't that this will probably take us through what is it? It's gonna be yeah, this will take us through probably the new year if we do these two things, 4 weeks and then 5 weeks with a gap. I imagine there will be a gap week or two in there, probably because I'll be probably traveling for Thanksgiving, traveling for Christmas. The Thanksgiving travel will be easier for me to because I'll be doing my dad's study. But the Christmas travel, I'm going to go see my daughter in New Hampshire, and that'll probably be harder to meet from her place. But yeah, I'm good with this. Human economy and then Empire of AI. Okay, good. Mission
it's
accomplished.
not it's not Dan Davies' latest book, which actually it's like a year and a half old, which is I keep on setting aside just because it is sort of dark. Not dark, but it's just talking about businesses just leaning into technology and making decisions based on cybernetics. But it's like when you have to lay off half your company because the machine said so, but it's not necessarily the right choice.
Mm,
And I think it's called the unaccountability machine. And it's really good. There's a economist that I really enjoy, Henry Farrell, who did a really good deep dive book review on it and fell down at quite a few rabbit holes, which ended up being about a 2 or 3 day spelunking on my part.
mm,
But it's just that's not a good holiday
mhm.
read. It's just like, what is the world coming to? How do we get in a better place, you sort of moving forward?
That might be a good New Year's. Yeah, kind of let's start the new
It,
year with a plan or something, or
yeah,
with a challenge. Yeah.
yeah. Everybody who I know that has read it said it was their favorite book of that year, whether it was last year or this year.
Oh wow.
Um, but
What
they're
is
just
it
like
again?
the unaccountability machine,
Okay.
sort of econ, sort of business, sort of
Uh-huh.
understanding capitalism and sort of the state of light regulation on things right now that we've
Mm,
had over like the last 15, 20 years.
mm,
And also just sort of technology coming in and sort of having leaders who don't have a technological understanding listening to what is coming out
mm,
and not really pushing back on it. They're like, oh, the machine said it, so I'm not responsible.
mhm,
And one of the things that he gets into really early are sort of accountability sinkholes,
mm,
or accountability sinks, where it's just like a lot of the customer support stuff will put you into a space where somebody is not accountable.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
it's just it's just like, oh, I have ways around an awful lot of that, but I'm just like, if those run out, then I'm back in with everybody else.
Mhm. Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah.
So I'm like, do I go with this tool because I know somebody's on the board? Yeah, okay, I know where I can poke back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a unique position to be in. Yeah. Most of us don't have
Yeah.
that opportunity.
Um, but yeah, I can dig out the Tim O'Reilly, and hopefully it's out public.
Mhm.
'Cause most of his other ones that he does like two a month. Um, and it's like a week or two after he does them for O'Reilly platform subscribers, they get put out in the public in YouTube.
Hmm. Okay. So, what are we going to say about the end of Jaron?
And let me
Oh,
I have a comment and then a question. So, one of the frustrations I had continually through the first part of the book, even though I wasn't here to say such things, was you kind of knew what he was talking, who he was talking about, but he never came out and said, "I'm talking about the way Google does stuff," or "I'm talking about this." And I came across something to me that fits on a smaller scale the pattern he identifies. So
Hmm.
so so what is a siren server? What is an example? How does it work over time, et cetera? And the example I came up with was my experience with Medium. Um,
hmm.
I work within, I know I write a few things there and
Hmm.
track users and money and just for kicks.
Hmm.
So once in a while I actually make more in a month than I spend. But anyway,
Hmm.
if you look at the history of Medium, it tracks very well, I think, with the pattern that Jaron mentions or describes. So it
Hmm.
starts off as a pure we'll take our cut, but then we're going to take the subscription money and allocate it across riders based on, you know, exposure, selection of their content.
Hmm.
And then gradually they, Medium starts pulling back from that approach. And so then they start playing around with adding claps and adding interaction. And essentially, at some point now, anyway, all the subscription money goes to the Siren server,
Hmm.
and participants rely upon resources generated in other ways, including they have this kind of feed if you're a participant you get. And if you want to use Medium, uh, I would say I'd call it for advertisement. You're going to describe a product that your company offers, and it's a story about the product. It's maybe a tutorial about the product. You can pay to have that, which is kind of an ad then, right? You
Right.
can pay to have that inserted more commonly or
Have
more
it
often or
amplified.
whatever
Oh,
in
wow.
the news feed. So they start with this pure model, taking out a legitimate amount,
Hmm.
and then they gradually so in other words, John talks about risk and who is sharing risk or who
Hmm.
owns the risk, or
Yeah.
the idea that the siren servers kind of find ways to take themselves out of the risk category, and it's out there on other folks who participate. And it seems to me, that its cycle, it just tracks perfectly. And I wrote the guy, I read an article in Medium, and I kind of
Hmm.
knew this stuff because I've watched it happen to me,
Hmm.
saying, "You read this book. He's got this concept in this book called Siren Servers, and what you describe, tracks almost perfectly." And I haven't heard back from yet. But anyway, okay, so that's my example. It makes it,
Hmm.
if I understand it, it fits pretty well with what John describes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And
I
then
think.
that brings me to a question,
Hmm.
because I think Jaron in the ending here, I don't want to, I'm not sure what he says. 'Cause I can never figure out exactly what he says. It's like we need more people, essentially micropayments. But then after listening to you guys last week, the argument I think was made, micropayments just never work, or they can't overcome the back end requirements to ever be functionally useful.
Hmm.
So So I guess that's my point.
Hmm.
Are we ending here saying, well, we just need, everybody's got to pay for more stuff, which to me translates as micropayments. And then we have this argument from last week saying, well, micropayments just aren't functional.
Or
I
everybody
don't know
be
if
a
that,
siren server was the other
yeah,
one.
I know.
Tens of
I don't know if
millions
that
of siren
resonates,
servers. It's like, well,
but
is
that was kind of my take and my example.
yeah. Yeah, if you can't beat them, join them. But it's still, I mean, you're still hoping for that kind of winner take all
Well, yeah.
outcome, right?
Well,
If you,
Well, no, there's a difference. It's like, yeah, I think you want to participate and play that game, but they're backing out of that game. They're going to say, well, if you want to keep adding stuff and attract all this attention, and yeah, we'll let you do that, but we're going to take our money up
Mhm.
front,
Yeah,
and you guys out there play that game and compete with each other if you want.
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, he at one point where he's talking about books, right? He talks about if we remove all the barriers of entry for authors, right, and we make these, and we make it, super possible to get something out there, so that, I mean, not necessarily the whole, I mean, over the years, I've seen so many of these, you know, plug your copy into this and and it will become a book kind of thing, which I don't think, I mean, maybe I haven't been looking long enough because I get bored with that sort of thing, but I haven't seen one of those
Hmm.
things really explode and take off and, kind of take the world by storm. It seemed like the thing that was closest to that was um, CreateSpace, right, which became
Mm.
Kindle Publishing ultimately. And I think it began as kind of a separate thing. And it was not as, I mean, the barriers to entry in traditional publishing were all kind of institutional, getting an agent, finding it, putting together a proposal and getting an editor and, to look at it and all of that kind of stuff. And, writing sample chapters and all. The barriers in sort of self-publishing were more technical, right? Do you have to become an expert at InDesign before you can make this thing?
Mhm.
And
well, I part of that I think is the amount of work it takes to produce a quality piece of work that's worth reading is really that's the biggest
Right.
barrier.
Mhm.
So you've got kind of that on the one side, and you can't, almost no popular press book is edited for factualness and truth. And really, it only becomes a question when it crosses a boundary into super popularity. So somebody
Mhm.
like Piketty writes a book on the history of economics, and then it becomes big enough that there are people who are willing to pick it apart and say, yes, is this really true?
Mhm.
And he's one of the few cases, but in his case also he's an academic, so he brought all the receipts to show you what's going on. Whereas, let's say Steven Pinker's book that we just mentioned and are considering, he's also an academic, but does he bring receipts and is anyone actually going to go check those?
Right. And
You
does he
know,
bring the self-discipline to kind of police himself and hold himself
you know,
to a
or
high
even does
standard?
the publisher publish enough of the receipts in the footnotes and in the notes and wherever else they're going to do, which most of those, you go to Basic Books is probably one of the biggest publishers in
Mhm.
that space,
Right.
and they're not always consistent about how they do those footnotes versus endnotes versus
Right.
any notes at all. I mean,
Right.
what was it? We read the Igloo book
Mhm.
on climate change, and I really wish that had
Right.
he had a whole separate website, I guess,
Right.
that kind of was tucked in there, but you
Right.
know,
Right, which seemed like, yeah, it seemed like it was the wrong moment in an evolving sort of media plan. How do we, what's in a book and what's not in a book, kind of
but and
because
then even before you get to that level, the issue is society in a broader sense, their attention span is not into reading books anymore in a broad general sense. It's much easier and lower
Sorry.
to watch a TikTok video or a reel or something else. And the
Right.
tools for making those really high quality with no gatekeeping are tremendous. Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
if there was a tool that could let me make a book as easy as I could make a TikTok video, holy crap, like I would be spitting out books every day.
Right.
But the issue is it's a lot of work to make a book. It's a lot of work to read a book.
Hmm.
It's no work at all to do the low-hanging fruit that really distracts us.
Right.
And there's a really good,
God
it
bless us
was,
all for being here, by the way.
there was a really good, it was essay, and then also I've seen a couple like YouTube takes on it. And also, John Mayer also poked at it a bit, which was the like self-publishing, self-creation, self-distribution um, has sort of lowered quality because there's not an editor, there's someone who's not pushing back saying this isn't good enough, this has factual errors in it, and so forth. And while we have a lot more options and from a writing perspective and being able to read from books, all sorts of different things, um, to music, to video, pretty much everything. Um, Having that, running the gauntlet to get something through music industry or the narrow channels that we used to have for, um, film and television,
Hmm.
you know, it had to get vetted. It was normally vetted fairly well. Some stuff, there was always things that sort of made it through that were just sort of like kind of questionable as far as quality. But you didn't have a sea of just things that just were so-so. And it was largely because you had many eyes and many people helping hone things. Sometimes that was a very good thing. Other times it sort of broke things.
Hmm.
And there's some good fiction writers that have sort of bubbled up that went the self-publishing route and had one book go viral.
Hmm.
And then they were sort of set, like Chris Pavan. He's got a really good series of books, and his first one was a 2.99 book on Amazon that he self-published, which
Hmm.
was a really good sort of spy thriller. And
Was
then he
Andy
just sort of
Weir's
has,
first book, was The Martian originally self-published?
I don't remember. I know it started out without anybody, and he was mostly done.
Right. 'Cause I think the
Um,
Dust series was
mm,
online, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's weird though, because I mean, I'm always,
there's a
it's
lot of,
always like Stephen King, you know,
yep,
and who famously, of course, opined about all of this in his book on writing, which, I had to read in grad school as a
huh,
historian.
cool.
And yeah, and I thought it was a good read, but
Hmm.
actually, I thought it was a better. I don't love Stephen King's writing. I really
Yeah,
don't. And I think I think that he's kind of an example of, you know, kind of having a name that's big enough that he can get away with anything. Um,
yeah.
and so that, and so I think that some of the things that, I mean, Jaron's got this long section about, all of these things, that might happen in book publishing, and then what is it about a book that's worth saving and all of that.
Yeah.
I think that I take your point about quality and quality control and editing and actually kind of in writing open textbooks, one of the things that I'm always a little bit paranoid about is kind of missing something big that
Yeah.
that ought to be in there, that because it doesn't kind of conform to my set of interests, I might
Yeah.
be likely to kind of pass by without giving it enough attention
Yep.
in a survey textbook or something like that. But yeah, I think there are there are flaws, but I think
Hmm.
the flaws of the system as it currently exists are also so great. I mean, textbook publishing, holy crap. The Texas textbooks versus the California textbooks. The New York
Mm.
Times I actually used to use that New York Times very well illustrated um, thing that they did, that report that they did on, putting the textbooks side by side and kind of
Hmm.
comparing, coverage and stuff until it went behind the paywall. I used to have my students read it in classes, in U.S. history too. But that and just the tightness of the funnel, in
Hmm.
traditional publishing now. Nobody gets, I mean, especially in fiction nowadays,
Yep.
nobody gets published. So
Yeah.
I think that's a broken system that the question is, how can we mitigate the dangers of the DIY world, to
Hmm.
allow, some stuff to come, on the other hand, my favorite science fiction of the past, aside from the Dark Forest trilogy. My
Hmm.
other favorite science fiction was the Hanu Ryanimi Quantum Prince kind of
Hmm.
series, which his that was heavily workshopped apparently in a writer's workshop in Edinburgh that Charles Stross was in, and so he got all kinds of
Cool.
great readers, and people giving him
Yeah.
feedback and stuff, which made that series, which was his kind of his first foot in the water, much better than the thing that came after. He tried to do a series next. I don't know that it ever made it to a third book
Hmm.
because it just wasn't that compelling. It was about
What
people.
was the series?
It was called
Sorry.
Summerland. The original book, I think,
Okay.
was called Summerland, and it was about dead people. It was
Hmm.
about there being another side. The dead people went over to the other side, and then there was some type of communication back and forth. But it didn't have all of that richness of, the post-singularity, world of the quantum prince
Hmm.
of
Well,
Frank.
that a lot of that stuff is still there. It's just in a different space that you don't see anymore. So
Hmm.
there's things like, AO3 where some people are writing a lot of fan fiction is what it's well known for.
Hmm.
But there are other people who are writing interesting things there that
Yeah.
just never bubble up into the bigger social consciousness. And it
Hmm.
isn't until you know, you're, you've written 50 Shades of Grey and it's already a massive bestseller that the publishing industry comes in and says, we'll take our piece too, thank you very much.
Right.
Um, but there's, things like Book Talk, or I notice it a little more because I'm on lists for advanced reader copies of things. And
Mm.
there is a
Hmm.
huge
Hmm.
industry of advanced reader copies for all kinds of crazy
Mm.
that just never gets seen because the book bloggers that are reading that stuff 8 months before a book comes out, the book is already DOA when it's published,
Hmm.
Mm.
you know, and it's only when it's like a big thing, or if you're a big writer already. But to be honest, I have seen a million copies of Dan Brown's book in the bookstore in the last week, and it came out almost a month ago. But I hear no one talking about it. Even the people who like to bash Dan Brown's writing style, I can't even find those people. Like, what's
Wow.
going on? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Raising my hand as one of the Dan Brown bashers. It, he had he had an early book that I had picked up, and maybe my mom bought it for me because she thought she liked Dan Brown, and I wasn't that big of a fan. And she's like, "Oh, this one has a technology bent," and like in the first paragraph, I threw the book across the room. I was like, the writing was just, I'm like, I cannot deal with this.
Yeah.
let me guess. Digital Fortress.
Yeah, that might have been it.
Mm.
I was like, I'm like, give me, Charles Stross, give me some Neil Stevenson. Like, I'm
Right.
happy there.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's funny too because I mean Charles Stross is an interesting example, right? Because he's got all of those, that nightmare stacks thing that that just
Yeah.
it goes like I stopped listening to them at like the 12th, and I think he's on to like 20 now. And
Huh.
it's hilarious, you know.
Yep.
And he's found a really interesting sort of a niche. Um,
Yep.
the One of the things that did strike me about what Jaron was saying, kind of going into this before the part about the books, was about the voluntary project that
Hmm.
that this that and I thought that was a
It,
point that was interesting to kind of keep in mind, right? Is that
Yeah.
all of this stuff, for all of its flaws, it is something that we, that we're not nobody's holding a gun to our heads most of the time.
Yeah. It was one of the things I kept on waiting for him to point to open source and like GitHub, and he never got to that.
Yeah.
And because it's like a lot of the section that we were reading for this week ended up being the book didn't go where I thought it was going to go. It just sort of it was like here's a whole lot of loose ends.
Hmm.
Here's some sort of hand waving around them. But it had me thinking more than the other pieces. The other pieces I was sort of arguing back with as I was reading them. And
Hmm.
this was just like, okay, there were some things that were sort of interesting that have played out not exactly the way that he was expecting, but I was also, the that voluntary piece, there is so much in open source and like GitHub where you've
Hmm.
got so many eyes reviewing and caretaking on things. And then GitHub also has layers of free security scans and other stuff that they do with open source projects to keep it safe and sane.
Hmm.
But it's just, and a lot of where, the side, pretty much all the Siren engines, all of enterprise are heavily reliant on open source,
Hmm.
largely because it's cheap, and not, largely because it's cheap, and then also because it is also quality, which you don't always get with enterprise things that you're paying for.
Hmm.
And, enterprise, some, tool vendors quite often want you to pay to fix their bugs,
Hmm.
which is thoroughly annoying. And so the way to route around that is to head toward open source and either cobble together something on your own or take something roughly built out and then, adapt it.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, the
and I,
other thing too is if you're in open source and there's a problem and you see the problem and you want it fixed, you
yep,
either have to pay someone else to fix it or you fix it yourself,
right.
which is an issue that we don't have in government. When you see a problem in government, you can complain about it and you can say something, you can point at it, but you can't actively, it's very difficult to get in and actively work on a thing to work towards fixing it.
Hmm.
You're
It,
more reliant on the people who are in the position of power to actually do that work to fix it
Hmm.
themselves.
Right.
And it's much harder. I can't fractionally volunteer my time really to actively make something better
Yeah.
the,
necessarily. There's ways to do it,
yeah,
but as a broader enterprise,
Hmm.
open source is way easier if you're that technical person and you have technical know-how and ability, you can just jump right in and get going.
Right.
yeah,
Whereas you can't do that in a governmental space as easily.
yeah.
Yeah.
In
That's,
government, one thing you've got is scale, which makes it really hard to do it because if you're fixing something, you can also be breaking something. But then
mm,
the
yeah.
counter side of that is government going back to like 2010s or so started going heavily in on open source and being able to have, you had Code for America, then there was also sort of volunteer corps for
Hmm.
development to help. Federal government had 18F, which was phenomenal and used a ton of open source. And most of what they were working on had open repositories in GitHub. And so you could go in and fix things, and their code was being used all around government agencies to solve regular problems that were, millions of dollars to have contractors do it.
Hmm.
And the code that was out there was doing it for, essentially for free, and you could implement it, and it was solid, and you could have your contractors either incorporate it to what they were doing or replace it,
Mm.
which so I knew the founders of 18F, and when they were starting, and they was talking to them an awful lot about you're going to really piss off all the large, massive government contractors, and they are very powerful and going to come for your head.
Hmm.
Um, and they about 2 years in, they realized that, or didn't. That became, real.
Yeah.
and they started really coming after them
Hmm.
because if you could do something, 18F was also doing the consulting work, and for $40,000 they could do what a government contractor would do for $1.5 million
Hmm.
as a starting price,
Right.
and it was making them look bad, really, really bad, which was
Yeah.
good.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was one of the first things that got wiped when Doge came through. And they removed the efficiency engine that was building.
Wow.
And so and it
Oops.
was just really odd. But it was
Cui
really sad to
bono.
see it go. What?
Cui
What's that?
bono. Cui bono.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
that's a good question for the tail end of this book here, and
yeah.
a lot of the hand waving he does.
Yep.
Mhm.
So he makes an argument towards the end of, and I'll paraphrase. Let's let the really smart cisgender white guy technologists just take over and make all the decisions, and they'll make it better for us.
Hmm.
Which
Yeah.
in 2013, maybe that's even a tough argument to make then.
Yeah.
Yep.
But given where we are now, after having seen putting those, tech elite into positions of power to fix things,
Hmm.
uh, you
Yeah.
know, and has that made it even much harder now for things like open source that could be a potential solution space,
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
harder to do now because, oh, we can't let these technologists do this thing
Hmm.
because Elon Musk has come in and just ruined it, you know.
Well, and the scale thing
Yep.
too. I mean, because, Thomas, as you were talking about the government, government contractors and government programmers and stuff. I mean,
Yep.
you mentioned Neil Stephenson earlier. I was getting images in my brain of Whitey's mother in Snow Crash, who's a programmer
Yeah.
for the government, right? And
Yep.
it's just completely, it's completely bureaucratic and top down. And you get something that's very, I mean, and to I think Chris's earlier point, you get something that's very effective and that it works, but it's not really what you want. Right. I'm
Yeah.
reminded of that Catherine Tate joke about, the glass of wine, is the glass of wine half full or half empty? And her response to it is, this is not what I ordered.
Yep. Yeah.
He does
Yeah.
talk about in the early chapters of it's an experiment, so you play around and you see if it works and you go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah.
And, I have seen spaces in some open source projects where they'll unveil something and it doesn't work and they'll go back, or you see unintended consequences or you
Yep.
see new bugs and they need to be patched. But it's, some open source projects just totally stall because it's literally the passion project of one person
Yeah.
who
Yep.
doesn't have the time to review massive code dumps that people want to throw at him to add whatever they want. But the difference is you can also modify the code and run it yourself,
Yep.
which government doesn't do because there is kind of the zeitgeist of what America wants to do, and there
Hmm.
is a president in charge right now who's running a bunch of code that
Hmm.
I think is gonna fall by the wayside because we're gonna realize, hey, this is not. He's running a bunch of code that most of America does not want.
Hmm.
And there is a huge chunk of America who doesn't realize yet that they don't want it or why they don't want it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so we're going to have to do a major shift back to the code we were running, at least some of the code we were running before.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of
Yep.
it doesn't part of it have to do with the size of the project? Right. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one
Hmm.
thing to say, well, yeah, I mean, it takes a big organization to build a reusable rocket, that can go to the moon or whatever.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that every project is that big and has to be done
Right.
that way. Right. And I think that's part, maybe, Chris, of what you're saying is that people are getting, and that may be, maybe Tim, you want to elaborate on what you on the paragraphs that you just put in the chat, that what we end up with because we believe that this is the way that work has to be done. I mean, we seem not to have, and I mentioned a couple times, and I didn't love Cory Doctorow's, thing that he did with Neil Gaiman and Amanda Palmer, that whole
Hmm.
information doesn't want to be free project. But he always kind of leaned to that, DIY side of
Yeah.
things. Try to find a way to solve a problem that doesn't create these big, monolithic siren servers, to use Jaron's
Hmm.
his terminology.
Yeah. One of the thing,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was going to just say with open source, you're not only you can rely on the creators, but if it starts being unkept or starts going in a direction you don't like, you can always fork it
Mhm,
and start maintaining it yourself. And it's quite often it's adaptable technology,
mhm,
which at scale is really helpful because the more you have something locked down, the more fragile it is and the more that it breaks. But if you can have it adapt and fit different needs, which is a really, really difficult thing with large government,
mhm,
is that they're building sort of single use endpoints that aren't necessarily adaptable because of scale. And you also don't have people who have an adaptive mindset to figure out, oh, we need to build a core and then build things that can handle many different instances and many different realities.
mhm,
It is built, so there were things in what Lanier was writing about and sort of volunteer and sort of that adaptive sort of space and just sort of where does that sort of
mhm.
middle development piece still fit and work?
Right.
That's exactly where it works. And like corporations that are vendors and selling products really want to control everything end to end.
Mhm,
And so they are building sort of the large, heavily structured, single use, single platform and non-adaptive technologies. And one of the things in a lot of my consulting and work in enterprise, as well as have years of doing government contracting years back, is one size doesn't fit anyone.
mhm.
And it's
Right.
like organization. And as soon as I get leadership repeating that, I know that there is a good path we can get to
Mhm,
because they have to start thinking about, it works in these use cases, which may be only 40%, but what about the other 60%? Then it starts fractaling.
right.
And it's
Right.
just like, how do you start, what you are building for Pennsylvania and New York may not work in Nebraska and Oklahoma, but it
Mhm,
needs to.
right.
And so how do you build for that? How
Or
do
how do
you
you
get
or
it
how
so
do you
that it can
account for the
adapt?
change log of stuff that you forked off
Right.
for Nebraska and Oklahoma
Yep.
that doesn't match New York's
Yep.
product? Yeah.
Well,
I mean
we
that I think is an element that kind of goes in the other direction from the whole Ted Nelson story that he was telling about, let's have just
Right.
one copy of everything and refer
Yeah.
back to it and stuff. But what about, the whole, I mean, how much
It,
volume of what's out there is remix?
yeah.
yeah.
It, I think the Ted Nelson, I don't necessarily know that it breaks because if you have, it's sort of like the inner source. So you've got open source for everything out to the world. Inner source is where you are building things internally. So you're only building one connection to a printer model.
Mhm.
Rather than having 70 different people working on a connector to the printers, you have a collective community that's building that so they can spend their time building these other things. And so having reuse, having one
What I'm saying is
copy.
that the
Yeah.
dynamic nature of the fact that this code is being constantly upgraded and tweaked, and
Yeah.
people are developing new features, right? So if we have a single source and micropayments kind of a system where
Right.
my version of the printer driver or whatever,
Yep.
is the one that people should be pointing back to. Well, that only lasts for 5 minutes until you come along with a better version, right? And then
Yeah.
Well,
the system's got to
If you,
account for that.
we
yeah.
see a little bit of that, and it happens usually in local government. So,
Hmm.
the Board of Education in Georgia could run education the way they want or see fit. And someone in Wisconsin may say, hey, there's this thing they're doing there that's useful and interesting. Let's take it and
Hmm.
build that in.
Right.
And if it's really useful and it's successful, all 50 states pick it up, which is similar to there's a concept in technology called Sherlocking,
Hmm.
where Apple builds a product that they think meets the needs of, let's say, 80% of the people,
Hmm.
and it's a podcast thing, let's say, and Joe says, their podcast thing is great, but there are three things that I wish it would do that it doesn't, so I'm going to build my own version and get it out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And he does that, and he becomes fairly successful, and it's not all three of the things, but Apple looks at his product and says,
Hmm.
well, this one thing he added is really great, so we're going to steal that from him and put it into our product
Yep.
because it'll only take a week's worth of an engineer's time, and we think it'll be super useful to that 80+% that's already using our stuff. And suddenly Joe's project dies a horrible death because, he was charging some nominal fee for it,
Hmm.
you know, but we
Right.
don't, it's so rare that that kind of Sherlocking happens in government. But it's also one of the nice fungibilities, the fact that, you know, Georgia wants to do something one way and Wisconsin wants to do it a different way,
Right. Right. But
is
well,
a
and
useful
that.
thing. And the issue becomes when the federal government comes in and says, "Oh no, you're going to do it our way."
Mhm. Well, and there's that question of scale too, right? I mean,
Hmm.
Georgia's got Georgia students, and California's got California students, and Oklahoma's got Oklahoma students, but everybody wants to be on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right.
And nobody wants to read anymore.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. But
Did
so Facebook has to be the solution for for everybody, because because nobody's satisfied with with their local community. But
yeah,
one of the other things that he said right at the end, I don't know if it was in the very vague and poorly put together afterward, but I think it was just before that, was the "I miss the future" thing. Um,
mm,
and I like that whole, so where are my flying cars, kind of
hmm,
train of thought, right? That there was an expectation. For a while, I was collecting sort of retro futurist imagery and stuff like that. The ways that, people back in the 40s and 50s, and even earlier on, even in like the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, had envisioned, what and imagined what the world was going to look like in 100 years
yeah,
or something. The whole, I mean, starts with Edward Bellamy, I suppose, but then,
hmm.
then the whole Jetsons kind of thing. Um, yeah, it's yeah. So
Yeah, it,
where is our future? Where is that future that we were promised? Oh, thanks, Chris.
yeah. The flying cars and the crazy.
Yep, yep.
yeah, there's also a group near Future Lab that leans very heavily into that, and they were essentially the creators of crud design fiction.
Mm,
And so being able to essentially project 5 years out, but you have enough of today's so that you can, you know, play around with what does the future look like if we take these paths.
hmm.
And so the near future lab, it was 4 or 5 guys who were doing consulting work, other things around it. They had done a like 2030, 2035 IKEA catalog that
Oh,
was
cool.
really interesting.
Yeah.
And they have a whole bunch of like cards where it's like you pull various cards from various domains. What does this look like? Tell the story about it. What does
Mm,
this do? And it
interesting.
gets you thinking it gets you thinking away from structure as we have it now to thinking if these structures are adaptive or fragile, how do we replace them
Mm,
and think differently?
hmm.
And I think about 10 years ago was working with a large old it was a new model digital design studio that grew into a massive global uh, design studio and then got bought by one of the big sort of advertising communication companies. And I was like, ah, this would be really good to work in it. And it was really frustrating because it just, they were not thinking, they were thinking thoroughly in the box, and they were building as small a box to think within
Oh,
as they
wow.
could without realizing that they were not boxed in by constraints, but how they wanted to think.
Mm,
And they were not thinking about what does the user need, what does the people who are, and it was for a large government agency, and rethinking things and taking old school approaches and with
mm,
new technologies, and which introduced n new ways that things could be done, but they were taking old approaches and just not doing it well. And I was like, oh, here are the gaps. When we, test with people, they're confused because it doesn't map to how they work or how
mhm,
they need to think about things. And they're essentially taking, Lego pieces out of a constrained Lego kit and trying to assemble something rather than going, oh, we can build new pieces. Let's
yeah,
figure out how we can do things
yeah,
and build a bridge rather than building a car that only is ever going to be able to get you to the edge of the chasm, not get you across the chasm.
mhm,
And it was
yeah,
just, I was like, I can't do this. I'm like, I just need to, was about 6 months in, and I was like, I was just very frustrated.
mhm,
And it was just, I'm like, how did we get to this? Because it used to be that a whole lot of folks in that organization were pushing the boundaries. We're like, how do we make this work? How do we make it better? What is broken? What can we sort of poke at and move forward?
yeah,
And there was a curiosity that always sort of seemed to be there within those domains.
mhm,
And that curiosity was gone. It just sort of became an assembly line
yeah.
that you were going to take whatever came out of it, and that was going to be okay enough,
Right. Like
maybe.
we have a solution. Let's find a problem to apply it to it.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
normal large consulting company approaches, where it's
Right.
just like, we've got a cookie cutter. How does your problem fit our cookie cutter?
Right. Right.
Rather than let's help you understand your problem and let's solve that problem,
Yeah.
which is
Well, and
where I like
that's
focusing.
I that's kind of underlined. I think I want to say it was chapter 31 where he makes the explicit point that
Yeah.
homogeneous societies fare better at certain types of things.
Yep.
So you can solve a problem, and if your group is homogeneous enough, everybody can be happy with it. But as soon as you add in some semblance of diversity, there are going to be people who are unhappy with that solution.
Hmm.
And I think the biggest issue I see with our present government is they want to think that America is a homogeneous society and our solution is going to work for everybody
Hmm.
without realizing. And it becomes an issue when it's, hey, I'm the president for everyone versus nope, I'm just the president of the 40% who support me,
Right.
you know.
Yep.
Oh, and by the way, warm congratulations on his final winning of the Nobel Peace Prize. Oh, sorry.
No, 2026. 2026 is the one he's going for.
26. Yeah, it's
Uh,
coming. It's
yeah,
coming.
it's coming. It's
Project
coming.
2026.
Right? Because by then he'll have solved a couple more problems, according to the
But
orange guys, right? He'll have
But
solved
we,
the other war over in Ukraine, and
Mm.
and the
but
China,
but
and maybe the
particularly
China
at that
Taiwan
point,
Strait thing too. So maybe it'll be like a trifecta. But yeah, no, it's kind of funny, Thomas, because that reminds me of William Gibson, the in the
Mhm.
peripheral, in the novel versus the series, the TV series. Uh,
Right.
and I liked them both, but I thought that the TV series was kind of an example of sort of, well, we have these solutions, we can do these things, with,
Yeah.
digitally, with, with our digital post-production,
Yeah.
so let's focus on these elements of, the story, right?
Right.
Whereas the novel seemed to me to be very much more about, sort of that really kind of tension between a bunch of things that had changed tremendously and a bunch of things that had stayed the same in their,
Right.
rural, kind of wherever it was
Yeah.
back, backcountry, lifestyle that they were living. One of the things I thought it was kind of ironic, one of the things that did change a lot in the story that hasn't changed a lot yet, and that Jaron expected would have been here by now, was 3D printing, right?
Right.
That was, you just went, she went to the fab store, and that
Yeah.
was everything happened, all of the action.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's kind of funny because there was an awful lot in reading through this where I was like, you can see that he was heavily influenced by being in the MIT Media Lab.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is, was it Simon Gershfeld, Fab Lab? And there's a whole bunch of thinking of, as I was reading this, I was continually having to go back and figure out what year it was that he was writing in. And
Yeah.
then also going, oh, when was he in the Media Lab?
Right.
Because there was various things going on and just sort of when he left.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, so he missed like the Oxygen Project. He missed some other things
Right.
that would have helped influence some of the things that he was thinking. And so it was this like odd, like what is the reality of, Jaron Lanier as he's thinking,
Yeah.
and what are his possibilities and where does he see his own custom chess pieces moving on a board?
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, he's missing these pieces because that influence has sort of shifted. And then he went into Microsoft and that has all of these things that are sort of tied to it
Yeah.
within their labs. I'm like, okay, and it was kind of funny, sort of like, why isn't he bringing up? I'm like, he may have known of it, but that isn't going to be where he was like
Wasn't on his
swimming. It
radar.
was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that he may have looked at it on a map, but not, swimming in that pool.
Yeah. Well, that's why I kind of felt like he went with Bill Joy, kind of in
Right.
that, of that moment,
Yeah.
so really it's looking back. I mean, this is published in
Yeah.
2013, but really it looks back a decade, and that seems to be maybe,
Yeah.
where he's situated. He's always seemed to me to be of kind of indeterminate age. I got to imagine he's about my age, but yeah.
Yeah. I've tried to figure that out as well.
Yeah.
He has this thing though. At the beginning chapters, he has a great framing for how technology works, and I think he rightly puts his finger on and gives a great name to siren servers.
Yeah.
Is here's the primary issue we've got,
Yep.
and it's well thought out. He's described the problem incredibly well. And then the whole second half of the book, he just kind of falls apart, coming up with what I had hoped would be a solid solution.
Mhm.
Um, which I think is the issue Mark had, that he just doesn't, he faffs about, and it seemed more like here's a bunch of interesting blog posts that I didn't publish to my blog over, a decade, but I'm going to string together and I'm going to throw them out, and that's going to be the end of the book, and we'll hope for
Yeah.
the best.
Well, and then
But
he,
it
and then
didn't.
and then he went nowhere kind of from there, because his next
Yeah.
book is 10 arguments for deleting your social media accounts right now, which was interesting enough, but that was it. It was just that one, it was kind of one note, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and he did have, a few lines to say on that in the closing chapters of this book with, hey,
Yeah.
it's a hard thing, but take a year and delete your Facebook account and
Right.
see what that looks like.
Right.
But he's also writing this at a time before the Cambridge Analytica thing had blown
Mhm.
up,
Right.
which is another kind of,
Yeah, which is a
although I
great,
Yeah.
which
think
is which he should have jumped on with both feet.
Yeah.
But he's also writing at a time, and he identifies Siren Server as the issue, and he didn't jump on that at the time to say, hey, here's exactly,
Right.
double down on the thing.
Yeah.
But I feel like too, he didn't look at earlier instantiations of Siren servers. So
Yeah.
if you look back at earlier American history, things like the railroad titans
Mhm.
owning all the railroads,
Right.
or early people in radio broadcasting or television broadcasting who own all. It's expensive to own that stuff, but once you own it and have a monopoly on it, it's
Right.
really hard for people to come in and compete against you.
Right.
So
These natural
those things
monopolies.
are,
Yeah.
Mhm.
those types of monopolies are siren servers too. But
Yeah.
I think broadly he just kind of missed that historical piece of, so here are old siren servers. Here was what siren servers look like now.
Yeah.
Where can we posit siren servers being not only what do they look like in the future, but how much worse can they get because things have sped up to such an extent
Hmm.
that, you have no way of, knowing what that next thing is.
Well, and he's and he
Yeah.
and he's I don't want to say tainted, but tainted by, I mean, MIT is a siren server.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and Microsoft certainly, I mean, and he did, he did try to kind of wave at, the idea that, well, yes, I'm of, I swim in these waters. These are my friends. He didn't exactly say he'd been wrong, but, he'd been idealistic or whatever. And now is,
Yeah.
maybe trying to atone for that. Who was the Wikipedia guy? Did we talk about this last week?
Jimmy Wales.
No, Larry Sanger. Um,
Okay.
Larry Sanger was on Tucker Carlson last week,
Oh
and
God.
basically, and it, with this whole, because he's he was only with Wikipedia for like a year or two in like 2001,
Yeah.
2002,
Hmm.
right? And ever since then, he's sort of been an adversary. Um, yeah, MIT won't sign the Trump pledge. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Larry definitely is a quirky, kind of far right kind of guy. Too. I've had one or two experiences and run-ins with him.
Mm,
He's got some interesting ideas, but his method of execution is not always. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he appears on Tucker Carlson as a.
yeah. Well, apparently he's writing his 95 theses, and he's gonna pound them on the door of Wikipedia on his personal page. Apparently he still has a personal page,
Hmm.
and he's gonna try to have them discuss. And I'm not sure that,
Yeah.
it
Hmm.
was interesting. It was, some of the criticisms that he made were interesting about, the high percentage of, I think more than half, he said, of the top editors and moderators are anonymous, which is interesting. Uh,
Hmm.
because of course being who Larry is, he thinks that, some of them are the CIA or whatever, or working for organizations that are trying to influence what people think is the truth. But in a world of anonymity, and that was, did we talk about anonymity really? I mean, did we say everything we want
Mm-mm.
to say about that in this world? Because that was, I think, Jaron talked more about it in "You Are Not a Gadget" than he did in this one. But
Hmm.
that's been one of his topics too. Sort
Yeah.
of the question of identity and in
Well, it's an interesting thing too with respect to the humanism that he tries to kind of draw into some of the technology, and we need more humanist solutions. And being anonymous almost always wipes that away. So there are spaces online where I use my full real name, and it's very easy to, if you go to Reddit and you see my account, it's very easy to tie it directly to me.
hmm
And
Hmm.
everybody else I see on Reddit, almost no one, I'm like the 0.001%. Everybody else has two nouns and a number,
right.
Yeah.
a random identity, and
Yep.
it's like, okay, and then that's great, but some of the value I draw out of it is I'll provide a response, and then people can use my name and say thank you, Chris, for X, Y, and Z, and it brings a little more warmth to whatever that space is
hmm
when it's not. Or you have to, in those individual spaces, you have to then memorize some phony name
hmm
that
Yeah.
goes with the personality that you see being built over time, which is a much harder thing to do
Right.
and is not, it's
That,
something I have to work at. Like, oh, this screwy screen name over time has this sort of leaning or this type of personality. And
Yeah.
it's not easy to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In addition to the fact that they're using some wackadoo robot looking avatar that just,
Right. Well, in addition to the fact that they may have multiple screen names and
Yeah.
identities for,
yeah.
for different times and places, which makes it interesting, to try to figure. I mean, and in terms of sort of assessing people's, kind of credibility and, and authority to be, to be speaking on a topic. Um, that there's got to be another mechanism to, um, to demonstrate that. I mean, or either that, or you have to demonstrate it every time that you want to comment on something, right? And prove your, your bona fides, before somebody will read the rest of your post.
Yeah. Well, or even in the Wikipedia space, there was the kid who was improving the Scots Wikipedia language subsection, and he had no idea what Scots was as a language, and just like, oh, here's what I see happening, so I'm going to write it as if it were that. And he
Uh,
had so much power, and as Lanier uses the idea of clout
Hmm.
later on, he had so much clout that he could reverse people who actually spoke the language and were
Hmm.
trying to fix his errors.
Right.
And it took unveiling this poor kid in middle America who could barely speak English, honestly.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, we have to quarantine all these pages and have somebody go through and fix it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of funny on Wikipedia when you're using a page or have a page on something and you get academic reviews coming through because there's like large collections of students that will volunteer time and are
Hmm.
like, oh, I'll spend 15 hours a week working on this arcane subject area,
Right.
and just go through and make sure that resources that are called out are valid, all sorts of different things.
Hmm.
And I'm like, when you see one of these groups come through and you see their stamp on things, because you'll see not only their username but also their affiliation with that group,
Hmm.
yeah.
and you're like, okay. And then sort of having battles with them,
Yeah.
and it's just like, okay, this is this is going to be a tough one. And usually it's just sort of like a small oversight on their part, or
Yeah.
they're bringing up a resource that they believe in, which has been
Mhm.
discredited elsewhere, or sort of vice versa. They're trying to, discredit something that, should be, but like that whole community that understands that that's a resource they lean into.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, and
so
there's
it's
a lot of
just,
rules lawyering too, right? I mean, you can't,
mhm.
you know, it has to be a third, it
It-
has to be a third party, it has to be a secondary source, right?
yep.
It can't be a primary source, which means that if I had a wiki page, which I don't, and somebody said
Yep.
something, that was incorrect on it, I couldn't correct it.
Yeah.
That would be first person, right?
It took
So
me
what do we
about
need to
12
fix
years
for
to
you,
get me
man?
unmarried on my Wikipedia page.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was like, can somebody please fix this? Because I went to like, and finally I had a librarian friend. She's like, I'll happily take care of this for you. Like anything else that needs to be changed, I'm like,
Yeah,
here's all
but
the
yeah, but Thomas,
resources,
I saw the wedding
background.
photos.
What's that? No, I'm no longer married. I
The
was at some point.
the
Reality
one
doesn't
the
stay
one
reality.
Right.
the pages that I like in that context
Yeah.
is where, for some reason, there's like a Lasso Dan page and there's a Dan Lasso page,
Yeah.
and the two writers probably never met and never noticed.
Yeah.
And is this there's this Russian fascist and there's this fifth generation Italian immigrant or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
and but the pictures are the same and the project work is the same.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's funny.
it,
Yeah.
it it's amazingly difficult to get that unknitted.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I mean, there was one recently where there was
But it's
a
only it's
particular
only it's
project of
only
my old
fraught
boss.
because it is such a siren server, though, right? If it were just a couple of web pages out there, then
Yeah.
then you could imagine that the cream would rise to the top.
Yeah, but as I was saying, there was a particular project where my old boss got mentioned,
Hmm.
and there's a page for my boss,
Hmm.
So the project called him white, and the page of him called him black.
Hmm.
Huh.
And it was like, no, they're both gonna be the same, you know. And
Yeah.
it's also a bit like there was a, a more sort of Eve friend uh, died anniversary, and this was Guy Kearney, the IT journalist who was sitting and waiting in a green room at the BBC, and there's some guy outside in the reception called Guy going for a job interview. Well, Guy Kearney's a bearded, what we call Jesus boots with socks on guy, 60 plus year old at that point. And the guy in the reception is a 20-year-old guy, black guy from Nigeria.
Hmm.
And he gets dragged in by the interns from the BBC saying, "Are you Guy?" And he goes, "Yes." He gets dragged in on live TV. He gets asked half a dozen questions, and then thank you very much. Off he goes, and he thinks, and I didn't get the job. And Guy Kearney still sat down there looking at his interview
Hmm.
with his black guy's face, and he thinks, "How that's supposed to be me?"
Wow.
And
That's
and you, I don't know how much the black guy knew relatively quickly after that, and on what sort of online presence he had, but Guy Gurney got slagging off because he was complaining, and it's like, oh, it's a racist comment, and no, it's clearly he's not me, you
it's
know.
mistaken identity. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Interesting.
um,
To go back
back end of
to
this book, back
one
end of
more,
this book,
yeah, to go back one more
I
time
thought
to
was
this book.
good on this. How you can see how you might get to here from here, but it's like, what's that first step?
Hmm.
What's that first step, and who's going to be brave enough to take it? I thought that was quite a nice. Yeah, I overall I thought the end of the book was a bit wishy-washy, whimsical, and he sort of lost pacing in
Hmm.
some respects.
Hmm.
If it was a thriller story, it's like, oh, I've got rid of a bad guy. Now what do I do? And I'm going to go. So it seemed to lose a bit of power.
Hmm.
But there was this relatively interesting bit of how do you take that first step
Well, it's sort of like
with
at the end of
with
at the end
sufficient
of
risk,
the
but
first Star Wars
sufficient.
trilogy. We've won. Okay, now what? Right? We've beat the Empire, right? So, so then the trilogy has to end, right? Because they don't want to, get into the nuts and bolts of what
Yeah,
is going to be the
but it's
next thing.
grown both ways, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and a
And
big issue with that is how much of that, because he does, just in that same section, I think slightly after he talks about the everybody, the homogeneity that Chris had mentioned, he says that this is all going to happen after the disaster of the crest of the age wave of baby boomers. So how much of
well,
this
yeah. But so
is a boomer, is a
Chris,
boomer
Chris
demographic
aside, we've
kind
all
of an
got to
issue?
go.
Hmm? Sorry?
Chris being the youngest sort of thing, we've all got to go, have we? Before this thing happens.
Yeah, would be the or you mean in the sense of,
Um,
come the revolution,
but
we'll be the first ones with our backs against the wall.
the crossover of some of these stories of what is the next step comes up also quite a bit in some of the science fiction writers who don't necessarily write proper trilogies, but they've created a world and they want to keep it going. A
Mhm.
bit like June, type thing, whereby I've created such a great world, I want to keep going with it.
Hmm. Yeah, but at some point they're going to find out that
There's
Paul
an
is not
English
the hero.
author, uh, Hamilton,
Hmm.
who who came up very early on with a company person, a bit of a Teal stroke Musk character before they all got all wishy. And there was still a British government.
Mm,
Climate change was well underway. Much of England that was low level was now back under the sea, Doggerland job. And the lead, the Musk type character, back when he was just doing SpaceX and Tesla in that context, and none of this Doge
mhm,
type stuff. Um, and he uses the company to keep the country going, etc., but gets bigger and bigger. But he has this lead character who's like an ex-SEAL Team 6 or SAS type guy with implants. So it's science fiction-y, Musk type implants. And that mechanism, as it were, goes through a lot of his stories. And
mm,
they are slowly but surely pushed further up a time frame
mm,
so he can become more fantastical
mm.
with his science fiction. But it keeps coming back to, rather like I posted in the chat, what's the Highlander type problem of if you're somebody who's such a now, you don't think about next week's quarterly report. You can think about the next generation
Mhm.
because that's almost the same proportion of your business life as the
Mhm.
quarterly report.
If you're the Highlander
And
on a cloud.
some of them make for some really good, interesting reading
Yeah,
relative to this.
yeah. Well,
Mhm.
there's another, there's actually an Asimov story that I think it's embedded in one of his later Foundation, after the Foundation trilogy stories, that he did, and then he collaborated with other people, and then other people took it over. But there's one where everybody has neural implants. And then I mean, and it's almost kind of like a Forrester the machine stops kind of a scenario, right? Where the implants stop working. So then all of a sudden, the person who never got the implant finally has a leg up, right?
Mhm.
And so that's going to be, and so I see that, and it'll be interesting. I'll be interested to see once we do get around to the AI dystopia, book, second one that that we've got planned is will be sort of this question of what things are people learning to do and what things are people gonna forget how to do in this whole thing.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like what Chris was talking about with you know, writing, sort of eliminating the idea of memory, right? Or I mean, and even Socrates was yeah, yeah, right, lost generation. I mean, and what about that? Kind of what was it? It was well, it's like Fahrenheit 451, but it's also like sort of the no man's land in at the end of Logan's Run, right, where they go out and they find
Mm.
Peter Ustinov, the old man, right, and he's like living in the Library of Congress or someplace, right? So yeah, maybe there is a. Oh, I haven't seen Severance. I haven't. I actually I
Hmm.
don't have Apple TV. Maybe I do still have Apple TV. Maybe if I do have Apple TV, I should watch that quick. Is it worth it, Chris?
It's a quirky, weird little show, and given your science fiction leanings, you'll appreciate it.
Okay.
And if there's two seasons out now too, so
Okay.
subscribe for the month,
Yeah.
blow through it,
And
and
binge them.
turn it
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. That might be something to do. Yeah. I really did like the Peripheral. I thought that I mean, it had flaws, but I thought it was a good kind of a series adaptation.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
liked. I need to go back and finish Peripheral. I really liked the follow-up book because in Peripheral I couldn't keep track of where in time we were with which characters,
Yeah.
and I'm like, wait, what is this is going on where? And the book helped me, or the series helped me give a visual representation. I'm like, oh, I can plant this storyline here.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, I need to finish that out. And then with the agency, I was able to. I didn't have that issue. It was
Right,
more
agency, right?
straightforward,
That's
and I
what it
could
was.
follow
That was a
things.
yeah, of course, because she has
Yeah.
agency. Uh,
Yep.
or she hopes to have agency or something. Yeah, where's my Amazon? Yeah, I have an Amazon link to the book. Hang on. Uh, I have to backspace from um
Hold on, I've got it. Maybe
yeah, okay, yeah, I don't. I actually went off to look for Dawn's Early Light and Steven Pinker and all those other ones.
I ordered a used copy, which will arrive in 10 days. So I'm trying to figure
Oh,
out how I can get a PDF to start reading the first parts.
yeah, I think I'm
The
gonna.
library.
Oh,
That too.
the
A
library.
lie what?
There you go. Yep. Yep. Good. I'll use that. I'm probably gonna be
It's a fruit you pick off the tree. It's called the library.
the library. Yeah. Oh my, that's
Awesome.
is there not I thought I saw there was a more recent digital version, like Kindle-y version. I'll have to
I
look.
couldn't find one.
All right. Maybe I wasn't looking. All right. Well, I'm gonna get yeah. Ooh,
It,
good for them. Good for them. And hopefully they get a chunk of that. Okay. So I think we've done
huh.
I think we've done Jaron to death here.
Yeah, the one piece kind of where we started, which I found very funny, which has sort of worked well over time, which was the limits of mortals. And just sort of the um, death is something that we can get rid of
Hmm.
because we've got the technology and we can like deal with all the different touch points along the way,
Hmm.
which is very much what like Teal is trying to do and a whole bunch of people around him.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's just, I was like, I hadn't realized that it had started that far back. And because I know folks that know him and they're just like, he's nuts on this front.
Hmm.
But that sort of surfaced like around 2017, 2018. They're like, do not start scratching the surface
Mhm.
on him. They're like, it's just really frightening. Um, but it's just like everybody around him is trying to do similar sorts of things. And they're like, we've got the money, we can just reverse age because we've got money.
Right.
And there was a whole lot in the sections that we were reading and just sort of that piece and then sort of talking about singularity. And I know the guy who helped start Singularity University, who was the executive director for about 7 or 8 years, had started a startup with him, and know him quite well, Salim Ismail. But it was just there was a whole bunch of things just sort of within that framing, um, where it was reminding me an awful lot of going back to the Violet Mahler book, The Map of Knowledge, of civilizations where they collapse and the libraries go away and all of
Hmm.
that knowledge and the people and the scholars go elsewhere and they're pulled from it,
Hmm.
usually before everything collapses. And part of what the Mueller book also does is framing what the collapse of a civilization looks like, which is a gap between the wealthy and educated and the bottom, and
Hmm.
everything collapses to the bottom. The wealthy, there is, the wealthy think they can move beyond, and yet they get sucked into the vortex of everything collapsing down, and
Hmm.
that civilization is wiped.
Hmm. Or they
Um,
escape to someplace else, and
usually
the
the
civilization is
rich,
wiped locally.
so the people like the wealthy and like the educated and the scholars escape.
Hmm.
The people who are the leaders and the wealthy all get sucked to the bottom. And so it's like, as much as wealth wanders, when you're trying to build that situation, and it's like, oh, if we collapse the system, we will be in a great place because we've got the money, we can live as we want to.
Hmm.
All of those folks get pulled under because they are still tethered to it.
Hmm.
And so it's just, I was like, of the seven cities, five of them, she sort of maps the collapse.
Hmm.
And I was just like, crud, there is, things do not collapse up, they collapse down and it pulls everything with it.
Hmm.
The top floors do not stay standing if the middle floors are gone.
Right.
It all goes down to the bottom.
Yep.
And I was just like, as I was reading Lanier's piece, that was just like credits, like it is showing the, hey, we can escape reality because
Mhm.
we've got money or we've got technology and we are above everybody else.
Yep.
And that's usually like where that, the more that that gap extends, the more that is going to lead to a collapse
Mhm.
because you don't have that tension sort of holding the top and the bottom together.
Yeah, it's like a
Um,
cantilever or something. Yeah.
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 And so it's
Yeah.
just like crud.
Yeah.
And was
Well, just to
reading,
add to that, I
yeah,
would say that I think that corporate personhood is just an earlier version
yeah,
of this, possible, plutocratic immortality.
hmm,
And
yeah,
so it's already, so the future's already here.
yep,
It's just, it's we just have a different and so I thought somebody I don't know, I saw a reference to Rehnquist's dissent in this First National
hmm,
Bank of Boston versus Bellotti case, that where he argues against the idea of corporate personhood. So I thought it might be timely.
hmm, cool,
I haven't read it yet, but I glanced at it and I thought I'm gonna write about that. I'm gonna read about that and then I'm gonna write about it and post
cool,
a post a podcast post about it probably. Yeah, I don't know where I saw it. I have to try to figure that out and give some credit where it's due. But yeah, I think, I mean, one of the things that does strike me is, kind of this element of demographics, right? Of this being very much of a baby boom kind of a thing, right? Because that was a thing that happened too. That was probably not deterministically, but probably very influential in a lot of this stuff, right? In the idea of universities, that we had
hmm,
this, first we had the GI Bill after
hmm,
the Second World War and in Korea, and that kind of opened the gates a little bit. But then we had this whole generation of boomers that kind of came through, and there was an expectation of,
hmm,
what you were going to do to be successful,
hmm,
what the trajectory was kind of supposed to be. And so I think he is kind of pointing to some interesting things about the kind of the the way that these systems of support, financial support for creative people and for workers generally are going to kind of fall apart. And it points at, some things that'll probably be in the AI book too,
hmm,
if it gets that wide, that it talks about, what's going to happen um, when kind of low creativity, um, knowledge work is disintermediated by machines.
hmm.
It's an interesting kind
Did
of
anybody
generational
come up?
moment, because this is going to happen to another generation while the boomers are, kind of sitting there in with their Social Security and their 401(k)s and looking for people to wipe their butts or whatever. I don't know. As somebody on the cusp of boom and Gen X, I
Oh,
feel
is that what I thought I
comfortable.
was on the cusp of boom and bust?
Right, right. Well, I don't know that Gen X is going to be the bust, but I think that I think that there's definitely, and I don't think that I think that some people have begun to just whisper about that. Um,
Hmm.
no, where is that creativity?
So there was an article he mentioned late in the book in like the last couple of chapters where he said, "Every day I get an email. Here's an example of one
Yeah.
from a college student. Have you heard any research?" Which to me it was like, okay, what kind of really crappy college student
Yeah.
who's interested in heavy research is writing Lanier asking for a bibliography? Like, spend 5 minutes in the library and get your
Right.
own damn list of books. Like,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
great if you if he was an academic, okay, maybe. So you could go to like Steven Pinker, and Steven Pinker probably say, "Here's a huge list," and boom, because he's got it. But Jaron
Mhm.
Lanier is not going to have that,
Right.
or I would doubt it. So you're why bother? But he said he wrote an article about creativity and collaboration that he
Hmm.
gets these things all the time, and I haven't looked it up yet, but it's on my to-do list, and I presume at least one of us probably already pulled it up already. So
Hmm.
I'll dig around and actually find it. And I'm not gonna email Jaron Lanier and ask him about it because obviously he doesn't he doesn't have an answer,
Yeah.
crusty old guy.
Yeah. Paper about collaborative creativity and oh, this is the one, the postdoc.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's
In
see.
fact, yeah, that's super lazy. If you're a postdoc, like,
Yeah.
there's somebody in the lab who can do that,
Hmm.
work for you. Find an undergrad to pull that up for you.
It was one of his writings on the edge, wasn't it?
Yeah, I would
The,
imagine. I think it was an edge thing, if I
Mhm.
remember. I don't have the notes in front of me. It's in the other room.
let me see if I can find it.
But, wasn't asking if anybody to do the work for me. Like,
No,
No, you
it,
just made me curious.
I
Yeah.
had it flagged to
but
to look up, and I,
Digital Maoism on the edge. Yeah.
huh.
Let's see. See what that pops up.
and if you're a postdoc, like pulling up and you even know that
There
that
it is.
article exists at all, like, you know,
Okay, here we go.
Drop it in chat.
Got it.
Lost out again.
Uh, sorry. The
I am always
enough?
amazed at how much volume of stuff is in the edge.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the site now you can move around it relatively quickly. It used to be really slow for a long time.
Mm, interesting. The yeah, it's kind of funny because I do this is good that this all this stuff still exists. Going all the way back to his half a manifesto of 2000. Yeah, wonder if I can get Notebook LM to help me with that, any of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. There's been a few times where I have thought about going through and just pulling everything from the edge down, and then I realize I've got two or three books that are collections of essays from the edge.
Hmm.
I'm like, hey, this is really good. Where did it? Oh, yeah, I know where this came from.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's
Beware of it. Beware of the edge. There's too much Pinker and Dawkins there.
well, and yeah. I mean, look at the faces on the side of this page. Corey, Jimmy Wales, Kevin Kelly, Douglas Rushkoff, George Dyson, Esther Dyson, of course,
Yeah.
Howard Rheingold, Quentin Hardy, Larry Singer, Yokai Benkler, Martin Wattenberg, Clay Shirky, and Fernanda.
well, this article's got to be interesting because the first thing I notice that pops up in the top of my search bar is my hypothesis bug says there's 18 annotations,
Hmm.
and it was apparently has the look that some professor assigned it as reading because it's 18 different people have annotated that page.
Interesting.
Um,
But they did it in public. I always, when I assign it,
yeah,
I create
and in
I
public.
create a
So
private
like,
group. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, there was an annotation, there was an I annotate project on one of the things that he waved at on the way back. Maybe it was as we may think or the Rheingold article or something. Um, but yeah, that one got thousands and thousands of of annotations. And then I had my
Huh.
students do it in private
Hmm.
so that they didn't have to contend with feeling like the
Well, it's like, Adler says about the book you've read 4 times, it's full of annotations already. You gotta set it aside to buy a new edition and
Hmm.
Yep.
start from scratch. Otherwise, it's too distracting.
Yeah. Yeah. Although it'll be interesting to, to sometimes to have that conversation with yourself too. I mean, if
Hmm.
yeah, if you want to see the book afresh, yeah, then get a blank copy. But if you want to, see yourself, then
Yeah.
then it's interesting to see. And actually I'm sort of looking forward to reading some of my dad's books in his library that have got his extensive, annotations in them, just to kind of and he's doing that now, apparently. He's actually going back to books that he read 25 years ago and being surprised at what jumped out, at him at the time versus, what he's focusing on now.
Is it
Yeah.
just me or has the edge seem like it's gone quiet?
It, um,
It's like
so
all
I
the
think
recent stuff is,
2023,
yeah, 2023 is like where
Mm.
it seems to have died.
Hmm.
yeah, it,
When
I
John
can't
Toomey
remember.
died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the archive.org has apparently captured digital Maoism 107 times.
Mm. Wow.
And most of them have been in the last year,
Interesting.
Hmm. Yeah.
which is,
It's that would be interesting to trace. um that would be kind of an interesting study to do, to sort of trace the recurrence of these things, or the
Hmm.
in the digital age, when things become the focus of attention for a little while, and what that means. um Sort of akin to I've always thought that if I ever taught at a university again and I could design a course, I might design a US history course where basically what we did was read old US history textbooks,
Mhm.
from
Hmm.
the 20th century, the 19th century, to see how focus and
Hmm.
interpretation had changed over time.
Mhm.
Because I think there are a lot of good ones, and they're all available online now. So, in the Internet Archive. So it would be kind of a fun project to have students read, what, Charles Beard thought about, they all wrote, in addition to writing the things that they're known for, all these people wrote histories. Bancroft wrote a history, and Beard wrote a history, and Becker wrote a history, and that's just that moment, just go. So, that might be fun. But anyways, okay, so for next week, I will have to try to get a copy of that book too. That maybe I was hoping that I would be able to get it the old-fashioned way on Kindle.
Hmm.
I'll have to get it the old-fashioned way.
I'm looking to see if the individual essays are available and back into it that way.
Oh yeah, that might be a good way to start. Yeah, if you have to wait
um,
2 weeks.
oh, the human economy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
You didn't hear me say libgen.li. Nobody heard that.
I didn't hear that.
Okay. I will now no. Hmm.
Tim's already got it.
Thanks.
I mean, Dan, you're on a college campus. I don't know how that's not the first place you look.
But
I
but
used to.
I picked
I
up
don't think I probably
my
don't have.
PDF copy
Yeah,
in
I don't have the
2023.
access. I've gotten out of the habit of looking just because I don't have the access that I used to have.
Was it somebody did a research study and I think they published it in Nature, but apparently the vast majority of all the hits to Sci-Hub are actually from within their IP addresses within a mile of a major university
Mm,
is the vast majority. And primarily the presumption is Sci-Hub has a really great UI for finding and downloading articles almost instantaneously, so you can just begin reading them.
Mm,
And the UI is way better and easier than it is to try and access and search for stuff from your university library search UI setups. So academics just skip the library and they go straight to the pirate sites
Hmm.
interesting.
because it's quicker and faster and easier.
Interesting. Well, okay. I'll buy that.
Which I thought was hilarious. It was like, but so it all comes, and it's like Lanier says in the closing chapters, it's all about the UI,
Hmm.
Mhm.
which, is an easy observation to make, but so I'm not going to give him credit for coming up with it first.
Right. Okay. All right. Cool. Well, then next week, the first section. Is that the plan?
Sounds like a good one.
Sounds good.
All righty. All righty. Well, have a good week. Thanks,
Yep.
everybody.
Thanks.
See ya.
Take care.